Buenas tardes. Esto es el PowerPoint del viernes pasado. En la clase, la idea fue primero practicar condiciones, that is to say, sentences with an if, y el tiempo o weather. Y hay 4 actividades a practicar en la clase y también las actividades de antes de leer, y estas actividades son preparación para la lectura del capítulo que se llama De Santo Domingo a Punta Cana. Y vamos a empezar con esta lectura. Bueno, la primera actividad de activando estrategias dice que deben leer por encima el texto de la lectura, mirar el título, las fotos, etc. y decidir qué tipo de lectura es. Entonces, at this time, you should pause the video, go to your textbook, have a quick look at the reading, and then come back and see if you have successfully determined what kind of a reading it is. So pause your video and come back. Okay, now that you're back, from the title, which talks about Un viaje por la costa sur de la isla, and it has pictures of like the famous catedral and the anfiteatro, it's obvious that this is a kind of a guide. The reading is a kind of guide for tourists. En español decimos una guía turística. Y una guía turística puede ser algo que leemos, como este libro de Lonely Planet. Una guía turística también puede ser una persona que nos presenta el lugar y también puede ser un guía turístico si es un hombre. Bueno, en la segunda parte de la actividad 17, tienen que escanear el tercer párrafo del texto, the third paragraph, which I've copied here, y buscar la información siguiente. So you're supposed to look for la distancia, the distance, de Santo Domingo a 3 places. How far from Santo Domingo to Boca Chica, distancia de Santo Domingo a Juan Dolio, distancia de Santo Domingo a Bahia Ibe. So you should now pause the video, and when you come back, I'll show you where in the text you find these answers. Okay. So we have las tres distancias son 30, 60 y 140 kilómetros. And you can see these places on the map. We have Santo Domingo all the way over to the left. We have Boca Chica as we move toward the east. We have Bahia Ibe further along to the east. So those are these intermediate places in this trajectory that the reading is about. So when you answer the comprehension questions for this reading, you really want to pay attention to the explanation in the hoja amarilla about what to watch out for, what to keep an eye out for in these comprendes questions. Because the first one, número 2, is one where you are required to make deductions based on the reading. We already have some information about distances, and now we're supposed to figure out cuántos kilómetros hay desde Bahia Ibe hasta Punta Cana. So if you go back to the previous slide, we had all these intermediary distances, and Bahia Ibe to Punta Cana is the last piece. But you're not going to find the information you need in the same paragraph as the others. So you have to look elsewhere to get your last piece of information. La pregunta número 4 es una buena oportunidad de contestar la pregunta usando tus propias palabras. You're supposed to explain what the chuchu colonial is, but please, no debes copiar del texto, debes usar tus propias palabras. Okay, so now that we've previewed the reading, we're going to practice a few things. These conditional sentences, which is basically sentences with if, and this is going to be in the context of talking about the weather, el tiempo. So, es muy importante distinguir entre el tiempo y el clima. El tiempo es weather y es específico. When we ask about the weather, we want to know how the weather is today. And the question we ask is, ¿qué tiempo hace? Meaning, how's the weather? Or literally, what weather is it making? And I don't think this question is in the textbook, which is a big omission. So the question otra vez es, ¿qué tiempo hace? Pero hay que tener cuidado porque el tiempo también quiere decir time. But you're not going to confuse them because you'll always tell from context. El clima es general. Por ejemplo, preguntamos, ¿cómo es el clima en Perú? What's the climate like in Peru? We don't know what the climate is. We don't want to know about today because climate is basically what it's like in Peru. And notice that clima is masculine. It's one of a group of words that end in MA, that Spanish, originally Latin, then Spanish borrowed from Greek. So a lot of these MA words son masculinos. El problema, el poema, el tema, el drama y el clima. Continuando. Cuando hablamos del tiempo, hay muchas expresiones que usamos. Yo voy a hablar y tú debes repetir. Okay? So, van a repetir, llueve, or same thing, está lloviendo. Nieva, o same thing, está nevando. También, está nublado. It's cloudy. So notice the first two, they have those ando y endo endings, so they're gerunds, so they're ing forms. Está lloviendo, rain ing. Está nevando, snow ing, as opposed to nublado is a different kind of word. Hay muchas expresiones de tiempo donde usamos hace, el verbo hacer. It's like in the question, ¿qué tiempo hace? What weather is it making? Podemos decir, yo hablo, tú repites, hace calor, hace frío, hace sol, hace fresco, hace viento, hace buen tiempo, hace mal tiempo. And just for fun, there are other expressions that use I, like hay sol. So you can say either hace sol or hay sol. Son dos variedades. Okay, and keep repeating. Hay sol, hay niebla, hay tormentas, hay huracanes. Okay, so those are all expressions of tiempo. We also have ways to talk about clima. So you can say that a place has a certain climate. So you can say, for example, Nueva York tiene un clima muy bueno, which it doesn't really. Suave, un clima agradable, un clima tropical, etc. So let's repeat some of those. So, la República Dominicana tiene un clima tropical. Philadelphia tiene un clima húmedo. El desierto Sahara tiene un clima seco. I think these are all translated in the textbook, but seco is dry, templado is like medium, the others are more obvious. Another way to talk about the climate is to say what the typical weather is. So you can say, for example, en la República Dominicana normalmente hace calor. I'm sorry, that was a typo. It should be hace calor and not hacer calor. Sorry about that. Or instead of normalmente, you could say generalmente, todos los días. Another way to talk about the climate, and this is very Spanish, is to use the verb soler, which means to usually happen. And you can say, en la República Dominicana suele hacer calor. It's a very nice Spanish touch. So aquí tenemos expresiones del tiempo y del clima. So now we're going to combine those expressions with the way of using ir a infinitivo to talk about the future. So you have on the right, para hablar de nuestros planes de futuro, voy a whatever, vas a whatever, va a whatever, etc. Just like in English, going to. So on the left, we have the first part of Actividad 11, where you're supposed to ask about whether it's going to make on different days. So they already have the ejemplo, which asks, ¿Qué tiempo va a hacer el viernes? So they're just taking ¿Qué tiempo hace? And they're putting it in the future. So ¿Qué tiempo va a hacer el viernes? And the example answer says that it's going to be hot, but not raining and sunny. So va a hacer mucho calor, pero no va a llover. Va a hacer mucho sol. We also see on viernes that it's going to be windy. So why don't you pause and check to see how you say that? So that's going to be va a hacer viento. It is going to make wind. Okay, so now we can ask about sábado. So I'll ask and pause, and you should think of something to say, and then come back. Bueno. ¿Qué tiempo va a hacer el sábado? So now you pause. So I would say, va a hacer mucho calor. Y también va a llover. Y va a estar nublado. So it's going to be hot, it's going to rain, and it will be cloudy. Now let's end up with domingo. ¿Qué tiempo va a hacer el domingo? A pause. Y la respuesta, va a llover un poco. Va a estar nublado. No va a hacer mucho calor. Maybe you came up with something different. So you're just taking ¿Qué tiempo hace and hace whatever and putting it in the future with va a hacer. In the second part of the activity, we're going to ask what day you should do different stuff. So this is an opportunity to practice sentences with if or si. So the setup here is that it's supposed to be a paired activity. So the question is asked in the ustedes form, like, ¿Qué día van a elegir? What day are you guys going to choose? Si quieren hacer estas cosas, if you want to do these things. And as shown in the example, at the bottom, the answer is going to come back in the nosotros form. So asking with ustedes, answering nosotros. Si queremos ir a la playa, tenemos que ir el sábado. So I'm going to set up the if situations, and you should pause and then figure out how to say an if-then sentence that fits in nosotros. So, ¿Qué día van a elegir si quieren navegar en un barco de vela por la noche? I hope you paused. So I think we want to aim for domingo because it looks like it's going to be pretty windy if I'm reading that correctly. So, si queremos navegar en un barco de vela por la noche, tenemos que ir el domingo. Next one. ¿Qué día van a elegir si quieren correr 10 millas por la mañana? Pause. So we basically want to avoid rain. So I would say, si queremos correr 10 millas por la mañana, tenemos que ir el viernes. Then we have, ¿qué día van a elegir? What day would you choose? Si quieren bañarse en el mar por la noche. Pause. And I'm going to guess sábado because it looks like minimal weather. So, si queremos bañarse en el mar por la noche, tenemos que ir el sábado. Y finalmente, ¿qué día van a elegir si quieren volar una cometa? Pausa. Si queremos volar una cometa, tenemos que ir el viernes, because viernes is the windy day. Okay? All right, so those are those. And then we have some really fun expressions to practice. These are basically ways of saying something more interesting than just yes or no. So we can say sí. We can say sí, por supuesto. And then the next ones you should definitely repeat. Claro. Claro que sí. Desde luego. Sí, cómo no. And the next expressions are really negative negatives besides saying no. So instead of just no, you can say ni hablar. That's sort of like, don't even talk about it. Don't even think about it. Ni hablar. Or, claro que no. Or if you want to be polite, lo siento, pero no. So in this activity, we're supposed to practice this in the context of asking your roommate if they'll do something for you while you are off studying Spanish in the Dominican Republic. So you're going to ask all these things. Can you do this while I'm traveling? And then come back with an answer. So I'm going to ask you if you'll do these things, and then you should react in whatever way you feel is appropriate. Okay? So here's the first one. ¿Puedes pasear a mi perro cuando estoy de viaje? You probably said something like, claro que sí, if you like dogs. Next one. ¿Puedes pintar el apartamento cuando estoy de viaje? You probably said, claro que no, because why should you paint the apartment while I'm out of town? Next one. ¿Puedes sacar la basura cuando estoy de viaje? So that one, I hope you paused. That's sort of a normal thing to do, so you probably said something like, claro que sí, or maybe, sí, cómo no. Next one. ¿Puedes recoger la correspondencia cuando estoy de viaje? Pause. Okay, this is a might as well. Claro, cómo no, o sí, cómo no. Although you probably don't get much paper mail. Next one is, well, this is maybe behind my head. I don't know. This is grocery shopping. ¿Puedes ir de compras cuando estoy de viaje? Pause. And maybe you're too busy, so you say, lo siento, pero no. So those are some ways of using these expressions. So now we're going to continue to talk about favors, but this time it's going to be to practice these if sentences. So let's see the instructions. Te voy a ayudar si me ayudas. I'm going to help you if you help me. So look at those wonderful object pronouns which come before the conjugated verb. Te voy a ayudar, I'm going to help you. Si me ayudas, if you help me. So you're supposed to pick 2 favors that your roommate doesn't want to do and decide what you can do in exchange. So you're going to make proposals and then they have to decide. So I have a list here of possible things that you might think of, but let's look at the example. So, si entregas mi tarea de español, yo voy a limpiar el cuarto todos los sábados. If you turn in my Spanish homework, I'll clean the room every Saturday. And this answer here is claro que sí. So this structure of si presente futuro is super, super, super common. I remember learning this in like 9th grade. And notice that in English, we need to have the word then. So if you do this, then I'll do that. But in Spanish, we don't need that. We just say like si entregas, yo voy a limpiar, si presente futuro. So I've listed some possible favors on the right. Why don't you pause and try saying some of these tit for tat kinds of things and make yourself maybe write down 4 possible exchanges of favors, and then I'll run through some that I come up with. So why don't you pause? Okay, so here's some examples. Si alquilo una nevera, lo siento, si alquilas una nevera, yo voy a dejar de fumar. If you rent us a fridge, I'll quit smoking. Otro ejemplo. Si tú compras pizza para la fiesta, yo voy a hacer la lavandería. If you get pizza for the party, I'll do the laundry. Or, si te suscribes a Netflix, notice that's a reflexive verb. Si te suscribes is like if you subscribe yourself. Si te suscribes a Netflix, yo voy a comprar helado esta noche. And you can go on and do whichever one of those that you like. So I think we're basically done. So to wrap up, we previewed the reading, which is due on Friday, and please answer the questions with care because they're designed to be a little tricky. And then we went over weather expressions and climate expressions, and we practiced them in the context of talking about the future with ir a. And we learned some ways of saying yes or no that are sort of fun, and practiced them in the context of these quote-unquote conditional sentences, which just means they have the word if or si in Espanol. And that's the content that we were going to cover on Friday. So, hasta el viernes. Adios.